Hello and welcome to Security Scan. I am Vishal Dahiya, and this week we will talk about India's first simulated space warfare exercise, IndSpaceEx. India is all set to conduct its first simulated space warfare exercise IndSpaceEx in the last week of July, perhaps. This comes close on the heels of successful testing of an anti-satellite or ASAT missile in March this year, followed by raising of a new tri-services defense space agency. The simulated space warfare exercise will basically be a tabletop war game with all stakeholders from military and scientific community taking part in this. Main objective of the exercise is to understand the possible challenges in the space warfare and safeguard India's space assets against any threat. After United States, Russia and China, India is the fourth country in the world which has acquired the capability to hit a live target in the space with ASAT technology. Joining me for more on this in today's show are a distinguished panel of guests. Let me start by introducing them to you, beginning with retired Major General Ravi Arora, the Chief Editor of Indian Military Review. We also have with us Mr. Ravi Kumar Gupta, a former scientist and a director of DRDO. And we're joined by Mr. Sheel Sharma, Distinguished Fellow of Center for Air Power Studies. Let me begin with you, General Arora, and let's put this in perspective as well. We're talking about space warfare exercise. This is entirely a new domain. And this is going to be the first simulated exercise to be conducted by India. What is the significance and what exactly are we talking about here?
Okay, see, the essence of warfare remains knowledge of the terrain and use of the terrain effectively. Not only that, we must have battlefield transparency and situational awareness amongst all the forces. That is being achieved today increasingly through tools deployed in space, of course, in the air as well. But many of the sensors, the communications, the imagery, the networking is coming in real time from our satellites and other assets. Now, when so much depends on space-based assets, we must ensure denial-free access to these systems. Otherwise, if the enemy is able to deny you access to them, you are going to be blind on earth as compared to your adversaries. Now, today, fortunately, we have a number of assets being operated separately by the Army, Navy and Air Force and jointly as well, shared as well. So we have the RESAT series of satellites, the Cartosat and many other. Also many satellites to be launched this year as well as next year they are planned.
Okay.
Now when everybody, Army, Navy, Air Force was controlling their own and so much of commonality, that need was felt and it has been fulfilled by having the government sanctioning the national, the Defense Space Agency.
The Tri-Service Agency.
Yes, the Tri-Service Defense Space Agency. This was sanctioned last year. And also to support it is the Defense Space Research Organization. The DSA will remain the parent agency and the DSRO will support this. Now, this is a new enterprise. Our anti-satellite capability is baby steps. Many other forms of warfare in space are being developed, whether kinetic or non-kinetic. These people, like the Defense Space Agency, headed by an air marshal and with 200 people provided, and its components remain with the Air Force, the Army and the Air Force. They need to formulate some kind of strategy, protocols, procedures. They need to know the capabilities. They need to know the gaps in their capabilities. They need to understand technology, how it is impacting warfare, what are the requirements, what does the enemy have, what the enemy can do. So unless all this is done, they will not be able to formulate a policy and the way ahead even for the Defense Space Research Organization as to what is required to be done. So this exercise is an exploratory exercise, and I can tell you, I've been head of the Red Forces branch in Army Training Command, which essentially means whenever you have a war game, you have blue forces and you have red forces. My branch used to provide the red forces. So in these exercises, scenarios are war gamed. What the enemy has, what he will have in the future, what he can do in what time frame, how you can react, how you can protect, who is responsible to protect, and who is responsible to actually defeat the threat to those assets. So this is the genesis of the exercise. But we have to be careful. It's not all about space warfare. There are many other aspects to it which will be exercised and they will formulate.
So there will be.
फिर कुछ बयां कर रही है कि मध्य एशिया के इस देश के साथ भारत के लिए अपार संभावनाएं हैं। यूं कहा जाए कि दोनों देश के लिए बल्कि अपार संभावनाएं हैं।
हम जिस तरीके से प्रधानमंत्री ने अपनी शपथ ग्रहण समारोह में विशेष रूप से अतिथि के बुलाया था पाकिस्तान के राष्ट्रपति को, तो इस वक्त ये एक तरीके से इशारा था कि भारत अब किसी देश को अपना एक फर्ज का जरूरी हिस्सा मानता है और इस क्षेत्र में भारत अपनी सभी प्रकार की संभावनाएं, चाहे अमेरिकी हो, व्यापारिक दृष्टि हो या परस्पर प्रभाव बढ़ाने की दृष्टि हो, हर तरह की संभावनाओं को एक्सप्लोर करेगा और को लेकर आगे बढ़ेगा। और कई देश के अंदर ये देखिए दूसरी मुलाकात है दो देशों के नेतृत्व और जिस प्रकार से प्रधानमंत्री का यहाँ भव्य स्वागत किया गया, उन्हें एक औपचारिक रूप से उनका स्वागत किया गया। प्रधानमंत्री ने सलामी भारत का निरीक्षण किया। उसके बाद प्रधानमंत्री जो सभी ऑफिशियल हैं भारत सरकार के, उनके साथ यहाँ पर दौरे पर आए प्रधानमंत्री ने उन्हें इंटरव्यू करवाया पाकिस्तान के राष्ट्रपति के साथ। और अब दोनों नेता आ रहे हैं, जो समारोह स्थल है वहीं पर एक अनाचा हॉल है, वहाँ पर प्रधानमंत्री के साथ उनकी द्विपक्षीय बातचीत होगी। द्विपक्षीय बातचीत में बहुत सारे दूसरी ऑफिशियल हैं भारत सरकार के और पाकिस्तान की तरफ से मौजूद रहेंगे। और बातचीत है द्विपक्षीय, उसके बाद फिर दोनों नेता एक ज्वाइंट प्रेस स्टेटमेंट भी इशू करेंगे। यहाँ के पत्रकारों को बहुत प्रतीक्षा है कि 4 साल में प्रधानमंत्री दूसरी बार यहाँ पर आए, लेकिन इस तरीके का माहौल, जिस तरीके का प्रभाव देखने को मिला है वो निश्चित रूप से काबिल तारीफ है।
अभिषेक, इसके बाद प्रधानमंत्री का जो राष्ट्रपति जेबेकोब से मुलाकात है, उसके बाद एक प्रतिनिधिमंडल स्तर की भी वार्ता होगी। कौन कौन से ऐसे क्षेत्र की पहचान हुई है जिन पर यह संभावना जताई जा रही है कि दोनों देशों के बीच समझौते हो सकते हैं?
देखिए, आपको बात बताई जाती है कि यहाँ पर प्रधानमंत्री का
How important is this area when we talk about the overall, national security perspective, and how far have we gone in this?
See, if we just say that, okay, it is extremely important, I think it will be oversimplification. Any warfare since time immemorial, although today the complexities have increased many folds, but the basic fundamentals remain the same. All that it matters is that one side tries to destroy the assets of the other side. For that purpose, they may send human beings or some weapons and try to locate, first of all, locate the target which is of importance to the adversary, and then try to destroy it without getting it ourselves detected. On the side of adversaries, they have to prevent it. So these attempts, they constitute, how they are made, that has been changing constantly, and where the targets are located or potential targets are located, that has been changing. If we look at the traditional warfare, it was all about the land or at the most the sea surface. But then the 20th century witnessed expansion of the dimensions. So we had the air and the subsurface, that means the underwater warfare. Now what has happened in 21st century? There are 3 more dimensions which have emerged. One of them is the space. Of course, the other one is the deep seas, where the assets are being created, and of course the cyberspace, which is extremely important, because these, the last two, the space and the cyber warfare, they are interlinked, and they are perhaps the most important one today, and these are highly technology intensive. Now when it comes to viewing that what can go wrong, because today no war has taken place in the space actually. So we have to visualize all that can happen, all that can go wrong, and how to defend our assets in that scenario. So all these technologies which are very rapidly emerging, what we try to do in a simulation is that you create those conditions and do a brainstorming all what can go wrong, how the enemy can attack, how we have to defend all that. So what are the different sensors, what are the different assets available to us, the means available to us to defend ourselves or to attack the adversary. So we create, as General Sir was telling, we create two sides and we try to simulate the real possible conditions. Now today, fortunately, we have been doing a lot of simulations for last so many decades. All our missile programs. See, the reason that we have been able to conduct these missile tests and develop at a very low cost is because we mastered these simulation technologies in DRDO. So anything which is happening, like take the example of the recent anti-satellite mission.
The mission technology.
Before finally we conducted it, for the last more than a decade, we had been conducting these simulations in the computers. So all the sensors data which will be coming actually from there, we generate that data. So the computer is feeling just something satellite is there. The missile actually is not existing, but the missile is existing only in the cyberspace. So all these things, all scenarios we generate, and in real time we see that how we are performing.
So this is one simulated exercise which will give us an idea as to what needs to be done in terms of countermeasures and also in terms of enhancing our own capabilities. Let me bring in Mr. Sheel Sharma here. Mr. Sharma, if we look at, as both the gentlemen are pointing out, and all of us are aware that the times have changed, the warfare scenarios have changed as well. It's the age of cyber and space warfare. So how do you see this change moving over, and how significant will this area be in the future as well? Because there is a lot of assets which are being placed in the space by almost all nations.
The important dimension of this exercise is that we should be in a position to get at one place, in one console or in one room where there are several consoles, all our capabilities, all our inputs from multi-dimensional sources. You have satellites, you have passive and active dimensions of our space exploration. Passive means those who are observing it, and active means those who are interfering it. The ASAT dimension was actually an active dimension that we could also do this. But and then you have multiple orbits from where you have different kind of inputs. You have a terrain observation. You have the way you observe the planet. Then you have also the capabilities of our country in technology, which are multifarious. They are disaggregated. Like we are sending Chandrayaan next month. Now 360,000 kilometers, that is the distance that it is going to travel, and that whole program, the way we can organize it, the way we can maintain it, and we've done a successful Mars mission also. So these capabilities exist, and we have further been building upon them in the intervening years. This tabletop exercise actually gets all that integrated into our system, and to see how competent we are. So this is a kind of an integrated competence of our preparedness. Now, we have oversimplifications also. They say, oh, who's this against? Just as when you have defense forces, they are against no one. They are just to defend our country. Same way, Space Command is also to defend our country. It is not against anyone. We are developing capabilities and we are proving them. So tabletop exercise actually is an integral of that through the means of computer, and at a different time scale. Because you see, this dimension of warfare, as has been stated by my distinguished panelists, it takes place in a very different time scale. So unless you are prepared for that, a decision making and everything has to take place in that compressed time frame. So for that also you require a whole series of these things. So this might be the first one, but I imagine that there'll be several such exercises.
Okay, and that is quite important as well. Again, reiterating the same point which Mr. Ravi Gupta was making. But let me bring in General Arora again here. And General Arora, let's look at the more military aspect of this. And when we look at that, let's look at terms of technology. And as both Mr. Gupta and Mr. Sharma also pointed out, the ASAT technology, which we demonstrated in Mission Shakti in March this year. India becomes the 4th nation in the world to have that technology after US, Russia, and China. So 1, mastering the art of such technologies, and 2, moving ahead as well. How do you see the roadmap from here onwards?
What I see is we are already following the American model. They have a space command which they established in 1985, then it went defunct in 2002. After the 9/11 attack, their priorities changed. They went more towards missile defense rather than space command. And then it was reactivated, and last year US President Donald Trump ordered that space command be made an independent combat command, the 11th command in the US Armed Forces, others being the US Air Space Command, the US Missile and Missile Defense. There are 10 other combat commands, so this is the 11th. But don't forget, they also have a space development agency on whose lines we are now establishing the Defense Space Research Organization. But they also have, because they have many more assets, they are nothing in compared to them, they also have the US Air Force Combat Command, which includes space wings, space aggressor squadrons. So they have been provided with these means which we have just tested as anti-satellite weapons. Not only anti-satellite weapon, they have other means which are non-kinetic. They are electronic means, soft kills through radio frequency jammers, lasers, high power microwaves. They have other electronic measures to disable enemy satellites. Not only that, to protect their own satellites also and space-based assets, many of them which are not even declared. These are the components, the units, which their space command will coordinate and command and direct. So we have started on that model. We have merged the Defense Imagery Processing DIPAC Processing and Analysis Center. We have merged the satellite, what's it called, satellite we had in Bhopal.
Yeah, there is another center there in Bhopal as well, yes.
Yeah. So we have merged these. The space cell of the Indian Air Force has grown into the command. The space cells of the other two services are also now merged into it. Although the Army, Navy, Air Force will continue with their operations with their satellites, but they will now be subject to control by the Defense Space Command.
Okay.
Now, they will coordinate, they will control, they will lay down policy, procedures, protocols, and after this exercise, the way forward will be determined. How this exercise will be done is very interesting.
Okay.
It's not a one-day exercise, it's going to be over a few weeks. There would be subgroups formed, the objectives would have been laid down, these subgroups will go into, they will be given tasks, there will be red forces also representing the Chinese and their assets, who will make presentations as to what they can do, what kind of damage they can cause, in what time frame. There will be other subgroups on technology, on defense, on offensive action, on what needs to be developed. So they will all come together, make presentations, discuss, and there will be a jury then who will give their decisions, and the recommendations will be made, which will over the next 1 or 2 years be followed up. Some will be implemented, some will not be implemented. We are going through an evolution.
Okay.
But overall frame is what has been borrowed from the American organization and procedures.
Okay, so that's the way forward in terms of the military perspective. And Mr. Gupta, from the scientific community's perspective as well, we're way ahead, in terms of the strides which have been taken by our organizations like ISRO, even DRDO, and the technologies which we have mastered, the art of, for example, the anti-satellite missile which we launched in March, which we tested. So all these technologies put together do point out the strong aspect of our scientific community and our overall scientific temper there.
See, I'll put it this way. As in terms of quality of technologies available to us, when we say space technologies or defense technologies, today our country is second to none. No country can claim that in every technology it is number one. So most of the pockets we are at par with the world. So there is no worry on that aspect.
Okay.
And we are progressing very, very rapidly. The other aspect is that when it comes to defending our nation, we have been a very peaceful nation all through down the centuries. And on the other hand, we have been victim of aggression in different forms. Now, when it comes to the generating technologies, that is one aspect. Now, what I feel is that one of the major aim of this kind of exercise is that, okay, when you want to really deploy these technologies, it's an entirely different ball game. There are different stakeholders, the services, the scientific community, the other agencies like ISRO. So when it comes to defending the nation, all the assets have to be pulled together. So this will provide one opportunity to take an assessment of where do we stand.
Okay.
Now, say for example, Agni missile or the anti-satellite weapon. Question is, when it comes to defending our nation, how many do we need? That requires huge resources. So these kind of exercises make a true assessment of what can go wrong, what are our requirements in terms of resources, money, and also in terms of technologies. Where are the pockets which need to be filled up?
Okay.
So this is that from the scientific point of view also, this exercise will provide that, okay, where should we put more effort and generate and fill the technology gap? For example, that anti-satellite. Now, this hitting with a kinetic weapon is one way. The world is trying several other, and these are all emerging technologies. Nobody has mastered everything. But yes, the asset which we demonstrated in Mission Shakti is a proven technology, and we have also mastered it. But then there are other things like laser weapons. Then there are the satellites which can be rotating in the orbit, and when the need comes, they can double up. They can either shoot down the enemy satellite through some soft kill or hard kill. But these are the technologies. So we have to see what are the emerging technologies.
Okay.
Which technology we should pump in more money now. We have the capabilities for all other technologies also.
So basically exercises like this will give us, an assessment of exactly where we are, what we need to do, both in terms of our technological requirements and the prowess which we need to have.
Very true.
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Sharma here. And Mr. Sharma, one important aspect of this, and let's look at the neighborhood aspect as well. You pointed out earlier that there are questions being asked as to whom these technologies are for, they're intended against whom. None, obviously, because these are the deterrence technologies which India as a nation wants to possess to go ahead and safeguard its interest in the space regime there. But as General Arora has also pointed out, if you look at the neighborhood aspect, the Chinese angle specifically, their technologies, the kind of warfare they have, and the exercises they have conducted earlier, how do you look at both these things in perspective?
There is a French saying, or the proverb that when the finger points to the moon, the fool looks at the finger and the wise man looks at the moon. Now, we should be free from that fallacy. We should look at our destination. Our destination is to empower India, to skill India, to tap the resources of our young people. We have scientists who are capable of doing many things in all dimensions. They need resources. And then we have leadership today which can guide them. Now this is before us. So this exercise which is being planned or whatever is on the schedule is to empower India. Now to drag that into inimical dimensions with A or B or C, I find is gratuitous. It is not necessary.
Okay.
Because what does it gain you? Those who have developed this, have they said this ever? Look at the Chinese, for instance. When they developed their entire thing, not once did they say that they are against anyone. They developed it quietly. And so the ambition, the national ambition, sometimes goes on tiptoes. Sometimes it goes on a different way. But in our case, that's why I was saying we should guard against oversimplification. Our media wants to know everything today. You want to do this for what? For why? When we were doing Mars, we had Cassandra saying, you have poverty, you have this problem, why are you sending it to Mars? They don't realize the extraordinary skill that we have, that we managed to send. You are talking of time scale, which is very different. You need to have clocks which can be accurate, you know, because if there's a slight difference in seconds, microseconds, the attack will change. Because we are talking at long distances. Now, so constantly, I would say you need constant assessment of where we are and where we need to go. Now, this exercise, in short, will be this, that in all dimensions, we have constant assessment, where we are, what is needed, where we need to go. And then we divide this. You know, then we give, programs. Okay, you develop this, you develop this, you develop this.
A roadmap is developed.
A roadmap. So this is in that light that I'd like to see. Otherwise, our position as a diplomatic in field is that we are for space for the province of mankind. We don't want it to be. But there are debris, there are all kinds of pitfalls there. So we must know space situational awareness is a very important dimension. So that our satellite knows all around it who is watching, who is with whom it can, it can collide. So that ground can control. All these things require to be observed. So it is in that context we develop it, and we should, these questions about who it is against, they are too far afield, in my view.
Okay, so clearly, as our panelists are pointing out, that India has the potential, has the capability to go ahead and master the art of these technologies and develop it further as well. Therefore, the exercises like IndSpaceEx, that is the first simulated space warfare exercise, will give us an idea of actually where do we stand in this field and what needs to be the roadmap from here onwards to go ahead and fine-tune our technologies and our capabilities. We'll come back again next week with a different topic and different set of guests. Till then, keep watching Rajya Sabha Television.